De faciliter des connexions, des relations et de donner des conseils.
Often the hardest part is to not just get in the room, but to know how to, who to talk to and what things and issues matter to the people you're engaging with. So our mentors were really helpful across all those things.
What was more rewarding is to see that we were able to take the SCUP project from point A to point B, supporting the growth of the project, identifying the blind spots, and helping the project leaders to make significant progress over the course of 1 year.
The SCALE program has 3 pillars. So firstly, we have the mentorship, where each project is paired up with 2 high-level experts, the capacity building workshops every month, and a support from the Paris Peace Forum Secretariat.
The types of projects are very diverse, and they come from all over the world.
The first day that the war in Ukraine started, we put all our regular activities.
Madame, je suis désolé.
Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to the Paris Peace Forum and to this session called Reshaping Finance and Investing in Children for Sustainable Development. My name is Matt Reed. I'm the CEO of the Aga Khan Foundation in the UK and its Global Director of Institutional Partnerships. It's a great pleasure to welcome you all here for this really distinguished panel. We're pressed for time, and so I'm going to say a few words about our topic today and then hand over to each of them to make a comment about the question at hand. I really think the title sums it up. So today we're facing a world of increasing fiscal constraints amongst donor governments and constraints on ODA, for example. We have fiscal and debt challenges in developing countries, the debt crises, in fact, that are constraining their ability to make the investments they need to. We, of course, have a rising tide of global needs, humanitarian crises, wars in too many parts of the world. Obviously, we have the climate transition that needs to be financed, but we also have a looming jobs crisis in many parts of the world. And so the question really is, how can the international community prioritize effectively in the face of these many, many needs? So one of our hypotheses today is that as we try to find things that are, let's call them dual wins, so where we can make an investment in one thing, but it actually achieves many of our goals. What are those things? And I think the hypothesis of this panel is that using a child-focused lens, by focusing on education, early childhood health and interactions, nutrition, we can, in fact, achieve many of the goals that we want to achieve for those other issues, and at the same time, we will lay the foundations for a healthy, strong, and prosperous future. And so with that, I'll turn to our first guest, who is the Prime Minister Patrick Hachi. Monsieur Hachi, Monsieur le Premier Ministre, vous avez confronté ces problèmes en tant que Premier
You
Ministre
have faced these issues as former Prime Minister of Côte d'Ivoire in a national context, and now you are facing them in the international context as you advise on the Bretton Woods system, so the IMF and World Bank system. So how do you see these issues as challenges, and how do you see this idea of prioritization and young children? Thank you for the invitation. Now, childhood and human capital more broadly is essential capital, as when we look to development perspectives, then of course you immediately see Africa as having so much potential in terms of natural resources. But the only barrier there is human capital in order to transform this environment and to enable sustainable development. And this human capital begins with childhood. And when we know this in terms of nutrition, so over the 1,000 first days. Now, if a child is malnourished, then the child will lose 15 to 20% of its cognitive function. So if the first months of childhood, during that time, if the child experiences undernutrition, then 15 to 20% of your potential is lost. But studies also show lots of insights on education. So often we build schools, but often we don't think of school meals, on school canteens. And many children, especially in rural areas, who have parents that work in fields and farms during the time that they're at school, these children do not eat well and sometimes only eat just one single meal a day and are able to keep up at school. And there's a lot of school failure and disengagement linked to that because they are malnourished. When these children grow into young children, then we notice that actually a growing number of young children do not want to work in fields because it is too hard work. But if you look at these children in the field, then actually you can see that they lack energy. So after a few days of work, because they don't have the strength, then the actual productivity levels of labor are very low. And so really, nutrition is at the heart of all strategies to develop human capital and development more broadly. So I think that this is something that cannot be cast aside. If you're looking at the private sector development, we must first and foremost feed our populations in food security. And this, of course, has to do with agriculture and many other dimensions. But I think a priority in our eyes is this. It's to develop human capital to ensure that the potential is unlocked to enable inclusive and sustainable development for developing countries.
Well, I think that's extremely well said. Nutrition is really at the heart of future development. It really is the foundation on which all future developments are going to, in some fundamental way, depend. Commissioner Urpilainen, when you came in and started your mandate, one of the things that you, I think, were very strong about was making sure that education and health were deeply anchored in the agenda of the European Commission. And I think it's been one of the hallmarks of your commission during your time there. Could you tell us a little bit about why that was the case, why your commitment? But I think secondly, what the EU is doing now, both through its assistance and its engagement in international financial reform to help the international community and national governments prioritize youth.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to this panel discussion. And indeed, education, youth and children, those topics have been at the core of my mandate as a Commissioner for International Partnerships. And why? I would only like to say that we have the largest youth generation in history, 1.8 billion young people. And nearly half of the world population today is under 30 years old. And 90% of young people live in developing countries battling poverty, health and education challenges. So I think it's our moral duty and obligation to provide opportunities for those young people. And how to do that? I'm a former finance minister myself, but I'm also a former teacher. And I come from Finland. And I know from my own experience that if you want to change society, the most transformative investment one can make is to invest in education. Because through education, we very concretely provide more opportunities for our citizens. So that is the reason why I decided to increase our investments and spending to education from 7%. That was the level when I started as a commissioner in 2019 December, to 13%. So currently we spend 13% of our expenditure to education projects. And we have 3 priorities within education. The first one is access to primary education for girls, because we know that in many countries, girls are still lacking behind and lacking opportunities. The second priority area is vocational education and training. We know that in many, and I think, Patrick, you described it very well, in many particular African countries, there are a lot of young people entering into the labor market. I think 1.2 billion young people if you look at the next decade. But unfortunately, there are no jobs. And that's why we need to educate and train these young people and equip them with skills which are required in the labor market, but also enable them to start their own businesses. And the third priority, which is very close to my heart, is teacher training, because there is no education without teachers. And if we look at the sub-Saharan Africa, there is a lack of 15 million new teachers by 2030. That's why we need to train more teachers, but we also need to improve the quality of education. So we also need to improve the quality of teacher training. And this is what we are doing. So under the Global Gateway Investment Strategy, which is the EU's, I would say, main tool to accelerate investments in the Global South, including Africa, we are investing also in education, research, as well as in health. And one of the concrete Global Gateway flagships which we have under the education or regarding education is our teacher training initiative for sub-Saharan Africa. So to put it very bluntly, for me it's a question of political will. It's a question of political will at the global level for us as donors. But of course, it's also a question of political will at the national level. How and where the money is used through the national budgets. So I hope personally that in our partner countries, as well as in our member states, our political leaders would prioritize investments in health and education and in general investments in children and youth, because they are the leaders of tomorrow, but they are also present here in our societies, representing the great majority of our citizens. So I think it's our obligation to provide more opportunities for them.
Well, Commissioner, thank you. First of all, thank you for all you've done, actually, at the Commission during that time and through your leadership and political will, because it shows what leadership can do in institutions. And I think 2 things I take away is that this is a moral responsibility. I think that's very important to say, but it's also it's the smart thing to do, right? It practically, it makes sense based on the case that you've just laid out for us. Minister Dodds, you are part of a brand new government, so welcome to the stage, welcome to the UK government. You have, I think, a challenging inheritance, a lot of fiscal challenges across the government. You are now faced with precisely this issue, domestically and internationally. How do we prioritize, and what's the best way that we can do that? Because the current government has also made a commitment to remain engaged and not only remain engaged, but increase its engagement internationally. Tell us how your new government is confronting these challenges.
Well, thank you very much indeed for enabling me to be part of this important discussion, and with all of these distinguished panelists. And even when times are challenging, our ambition cannot be dimmed for the reasons that we've already heard so powerfully articulated by Patrick and Jutta as well. I think you will find, audience, that many of the speakers on this panel will make the same argument, and I will make it again. As the UK's new Minister for Development and for Women and Equalities, I obviously see the moral case for supporting children, but my goodness, that economic case is incredibly clear as well, and it has already been stated very powerfully. We know that investing in children is a very effective solution multiplier. That includes, of course, often especially for girls who deserve to be able to pursue their own dreams for their own lives, to have the power to lift up whole families, communities, countries and economies. And we also know that demographic changes are critical here, and that jobs challenge that both Patrick and Jutta talked about so powerfully, where we need to make sure that children are able to get the start that they deserve, particularly in the first 1,000 days. That comes down to the kind of issues around nutrition that Patrick talked about, but also around, of course, education too, as was mentioned, and good quality foundational education with well-trained teachers. Also, of course, safety as well, which is so important for children, and a loving, caring, and above all, safe family environment. And I've seen, since I started as Minister for Development for the UK, unfortunately some situations where that is often not available for many children. In South Sudan, for example, I met particularly girls who'd been bearing the brunt of the climate crisis, with higher levels of flooding, lack of access to productive land for their families, a lack of opportunity, but also severe insecurity and being unable to safely even go to collect firewood or sometimes even go to the bathroom. So we really do need to be working together. I've also seen great examples of how we can do that. You know, projects where we've seen, for example, economic opportunities unlocked for communities linked in with education and delivering for everyone, as I saw when I was in Indonesia, for example, with some of our joint programming. So we need to make sure that we're actually seizing the benefits from this, that we're working together. Really great to be having this conversation across so many countries and with so many individuals who've done so much on this. But we do need to be unlocking investment. We've got to do more. There is that strong reform agenda, which I know we'll be talking about. We as the UK are seeking to intensify our work on this so that we're really leveraging more to invest in education overall. It also means, of course, we need to make sure the major institutions are delivering on this too and are aware of the long-term benefits of decision making. And we need to make sure, and I'll just end on this subject, that the voices of children and young people are actually heard around all of this. I'm delighted I'm going to be speaking with some young people in the UK Parliament before I go to Baku to the next COP. I think it's really important that we keep working with children, hearing their voices. I'm really pleased the UK could join President Macron's initiatives around this and the Olympic Games work that he was undertaking around sports for children. Children should be able to play as well as learn, as well as have enough to eat, as well as be kept safe. So really looking forward to working with all of you on this agenda, and of course in the run-up to Seville as well. And thank you again for inviting me to be on the panel. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. You know, the UK government, across multiple governments, going back now 20 years, has been a leader on nutrition, on girls' education. As an organization that also started with girls' education some 120 years ago, I can say that that commitment is vital, and it sends a signal to everyone in the international community, and we're delighted to have you here and for your leadership. I think for those who are tweeting, one of the things you should take away from this is solutions multiplier. I think that's definitely hashtag solutions multiplier. It's something we need to be thinking about when we think about investing in children as a way of thinking about prioritization and challenge environment. Lu Mai, thank you and welcome. We're delighted to have you here. You know, one of the most extraordinary stories of in human development is the China story over the past 3 decades. What has been accomplished there. You have researched these issues around childhood, around youth extensively in your role at the China Development Research Foundation. Could you tell us a little bit about both what China's experience as a country and your individual research, what lessons we can learn about early childhood and this issue of prioritization and where we should focus our efforts?
Thank you. It's my pleasure to speak here. During the campaign, anti-poverty campaign in China, government do pay a lot of attention to the child development. Summarize the experience, and the government formed the plan for the child development in poverty area in 2014. So that's covered the nutrition and education area. For example, for the nutrition, the children from 6 months to 24 months receive a free sashimi every day and eat that. And in the school, there's a school meal, a free school meal. And for the education, preschool education is covered now. It's 90% of the rural kids. And compulsory education is free. And also, government encourage the children graduate from 9 years school and go to the vocational training school. So, what this happened? Why this happened? One is government willingness, but government is a bureaucratic system. So, to convince them, we need 2 things. I come from China Development Research Foundation, which is a non-profit organization. We do the social experiment and provide evidence-based policy suggestion to the government. Meanwhile, we motivate the social forces to join us to ask the government to take action. For example, the school meal. In 2007, we started the school meal project in the poverty area, covered 2,000 kids, students, but another 100 students receive clothes and shoes without food. So after 1 year, compare these 2 groups. So the kids with the food grows faster. This is very simple, but we measure that 1.3 centimeter. So Premier looked this report and make an instruction, increase the expenditure. But that did not solve the problems for the kids, rural kids. Without the kitchen, without somebody to cook for them, it cannot serve them the school meal. So we did 2 rounds of evaluation because the government already spent 10 billion RMB on students' nutrition. So after that, we also reported to the Premier and also released this to media, CCTV report about our assessment. And the whole China people see the students only eat bread with just some water or eat the rice with some soybean. So people feel uncomfortable. And then It's 500 media reporter get together and raise a fund for free meal for students. So these two come together, and finally government decided to expend more money than ever for the school meal. That's 20 billion RMB per year, cover 40 million of rural kids. So we did assessment 2021. That means 8 years passed. The students now grows in the rural grows faster compared with the national average. For example, 50 years boys in the rural now grow compared with 2012. They grow 10 centimeter compared with before. And for girls, it's 8 centimeter. So they're closer to the national average. Now in the rural area, we see this healthy and higher the boys, girls. So this is just one example how we work together with the social force and with the government to finally benefit the kids. Now we're working on the issue of parenting 0 to 3. We learned that from UK Jamaica model. Professor Sally McGurk helped us. And we conducted that in the pilot project in one county. And Professor James Hackman from Chicago University helped us to do the assessment. It shows 84% of the kids get benefit from this program. And the cost for each for 1 year is 3,000 RMB. So we want to expand it, but this is something new in China. How to make the decision as a government to spend billion and billion money on this remote area and in the family. So we decided the expanded program from 9,000 now to 100,000 kids, help them to get home visiting. Now we have 111 initiators come with us, and each of them donate 30,000 RMB. For individual, this is not a small amount of money, but they are professors, they are retired government officials, they are small businessmen, but they join us. And 11 companies also join us, raised 70 million of RMB. It's still short. We are now covered 40,000 of kids who can receive 1 year's home visiting. We're working hard, and we hope. Also, government has some financial problems, the difficulties, but I hope they realize this is an important issue and finance it. So thank you. I talked too much.
Dumai, thank you very much. I mean, I think when you hear that very detailed example of a difference that nutrition intervention, school feeding has made 10 centimeters of growth in successive children. I mean, you hear those kind of results, and it really underscores this sense of the moral case for why we have to be working in nutrition, but also, frankly, the practical case that this can make a difference. And so thank you very much for bringing those important examples to us. Maintenant, je vais tourner à Rosalie Diop. Rosalie,
I'd like to turn now to Rosalie Diop, who will give us detailed, we just heard rather detailed examples from China, and as well as in you, Rosalie Diop, in Senegal, and elsewhere. You've worked on child and youth education and also on health programs. what are the lessons learned for us, or what can you share with us on when it comes to the importance of giving priority to youth investment?
Merci beaucoup pour l'invitation.
Yes, thank you very much indeed for inviting me, Matt, and thank you for giving me the floor. It has been a real pleasure to take part in this panel debate, and a pleasure to meet these distinguished speakers. The question today is to think about how to invest on children and childhood more broadly. This challenge is clearly evident, and we no longer need to speak to the importance of this challenge, because we are working and living in a world that is more and more complex, with rising budget cuts. If I look at African countries more broadly, and Senegal more specifically, one can see that those are countries with a lack of social protection and social safety nets. We can also see today that mechanical solidarity mechanisms that were the foundation of African solidarity are starting to erode. In other words, we are faced with multiple problems and challenges. And youth today, especially children, are the main victims of these challenges and stakes. It has to be said. I'd like to speak about two principles. One tends to say that children are our future, and that is true. I take as a basis the fact that if these children are well trained, well educated, and in very good health, they will be able to take on the roles that we expect of them in the future and to govern us. The other important aspect that I'd like to stress is as follows. When one speaks of childhood, one has the impression that it is a homogeneous block, or it's a category that is more or less divided, where you may find street children, children in challenging circumstances, children experiencing mental health issues, children with reproductive issues, early marriage and early pregnancy. In other words, this is a very heterogeneous group with various challenges and faced with different intertwined problems. Now, we have carried out, as academics, a great deal of research on the various categories of what we call children in difficult circumstances, whether it is relating to cultural violence or domestic violence. And we realized that more often than not, when we designed programs for children, we always tended to stress the victimization aspect of children, where children are portrayed as victims, and that, generally speaking, when you try to find solutions to their problems, you don't actually link the children to these solutions. What we heard earlier was extremely important. Today, of course, it goes without saying these children are victims, but they're players in their own development. And more often than not, those children that we have met at the grassroots level are children who actually can carry out projects, they can drive projects. In other words, I should not think about a problem and finding solutions for these children, but I try to consider these children as part and parcel of the solutions, as stakeholders in finding solutions to their own challenges. And it is within this context today that we are working with 2 or 3 stakeholders who can help us consider children as co-producers of knowledge and solutions. And in this respect, we look at their needs. And it is the children themselves who will, at the grassroots level, identify the needs and then will analyze these needs with our researchers. So what am I saying in essence? Today we need investment so that we can revamp the way we think about these children in all social categories and not to put them all in the same category. Every category comes with its own specific needs. Every category comes with specific solutions. And it is within that framework that research is absolutely fundamental. I am part of the researchers who today say that research is what will guide decision-making, whether it is at the political level or decisions at the level of funders. In other words, I stress co-creation, co-production of knowledge, and I stress the fact that today we should not be faced with youth who are no longer have a body of knowledge, especially with the digital transition today and technology. Youth today can solve as many problems today as the number of problems we adults can solve. In other words, today, what matters is that we work with these youth, these children, and invest on their capabilities so that we can build a better world. This is what I'd like to do when it comes to the challenges that apply to youth as a whole. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup. Merci.
Thank you very much for those comments. I think that we need to unlock the potential within these youth. This is what really matters. And thank you very much for drawing our attention to that. I think that you've also used the word interdependencies. And that brings us back to what we had started with the Prime Minister, with the Minister who spoke about interdependencies. Because these problems are interdependent and intertwined, in acting on these different problems, we can derive many benefits, both at the micro level within the youth and at the national level, and also at the international level. We can garner benefits.
Anton Garcia, who leads the Spanish Agency for Development, is involved in the preparation for the conference in Sevilla next year around financing for development. And I think this gives us an opportunity now to go from Rosalie's very useful interventions at almost a micro level, if you will, to zoom out back to this macro level and think a little bit about what it's going to take to get the financing both to the national level and then to that community level so that we can, in fact, liberate their potential. Anton, easy question. To sum up the panel, I thought I'd just, leave the easiest one for you for last. No, please, tell us a little bit about how you've been working on this, both at the Spanish Agency Development and across your career, and what sort of insights or how you were thinking about this as you go into preparations for Sevilla.
Well, thank you, Matt. First of all, thank you for the invitation to the Paris Peace Forum. It's quite intimidating to speak in the astonishing view of the Eiffel Tower, and I have the best view here. Let me use my 5 minutes around 4 ideas. The first one, and I think is coming quite clear from the panel, is that development cooperation is in need of a new narrative. We talk about fiscal pressures, we talk about public opinions, not just in countries in the global north that are looking into what is it for us too, but also in the global south. My business is traveling in countries. I speak to government officials in our partner countries. Nobody is asking about aid anymore. What people are asking for is partnership. So we need to move from aid to partnership. We need to change the what we do, how we do it, and how much also. So we need to, and I think Commissioner Pilarin was mentioning Global Gateway, we need to bring sustainable investment as well. There is a lot of money in the world. It is sitting in the financial markets. We need to channel it into sustainable investment in our partner countries. This business goes beyond development agencies. We, of course, need the countries in the driving seat. I cannot emphasize this enough. Like, the principles of effectiveness still need to be there, appropriation, alignment, etc. But we need the private sector, we need civil society, we need everyone on board. we need to change the narrative also in that we look at development cooperation as an expenditure. It is an investment, and I think education and children taking them seriously is really a clear case for an investment. And we need to, of course, continue talking about solidarity. That's actually what is pushing us to do the work we do, but also about responsibility. You know, this is countries in the north, in the south, in the east, and the west, taking responsibility for the world's challenges. Migration movements, a lot of what will happen in migration flows in the world will depend on whether Africa is able to provide quality jobs to the 18 million people, boys and girls, that enter the labor market every year. So that's what Spain is doing. Last year we adopted a new law that puts children's rights at the center. We have a new strategy supporting our partner countries on a triple transition: ecological, economic, but also social, and with children's rights, human rights, and in particular the rights of children at the center. And we are also increasing our ODA. We're among the few countries that is taking this step now because we think it is the right time when things are challenging to step up the investments. Second idea, I think children are clearly the case for an investment in this new narrative on development cooperation. Let's focus on children. Children are seen often as a soft topic, you know, and Commissioner European I like her image of speaking as a teacher and a finance minister. As teachers, children come naturally as a priority, and probably as heads of development agencies too. We need the finance ministers also to think about children, and that's very clear, because what happens to children is clear also to hard topics like poverty. More than 50% of the world's poor are children. Hunger. The cost of malnourishment in 21 African countries, this is data from the African Union, is 15 billion a year. So there is a clear economic cost, quantifiable cost on addressing malnourishment. Questions like growth, human capital. You know, education is what determines your growth rate in the future, the formation of human capital. And there are, as we speak, 260 million children in the world that do not have access to education. We really know how to go after these children. I'm taking a plane after this to go to COP. Climate and children, they are obviously going to be here to see the consequences of what we do now. Or conflict. Half of the children, half of the people, the civilians that have died, unfortunately, in Gaza are children. And every 4 seconds there is a child dying in the world out of violence. So this is, of course, very important. So we're talking about growth, we're talking about wars, we're talking about very hard topics when we talk about children. Third idea, what is it that we need to do? We need to do more, but we need to do better. So those of us that can grow ODA budgets, let's do it. That's why we increased last year by 20% our education budget to invest in this. And for instance, we have a commitment, 25 million with the GPE, the Global Partnership for Education, in particular focusing on girls. But let's also get granular and look at the policies that really can make a difference, you know, assuming a constant budget. Vaccination, that's also why we are investing heavily in Gavi. It's saving lives, it's saving millions of lives to vaccinate children. And unfortunately, we know that as a result of the pandemic, there are many zero-dose children in the world that have not been vaccinated. Or we are a feminist development cooperation. I think Minister Dodds also in her twin capacity mentioned this as well. Girls, HPV, cervical cancer kills 350,000 women a year. We need to ramp up vaccination for HPV. Only 15% of girls in the world get vaccinated. We need to do that. So, Seville, globally, what is it that we can do? I mean, of course, it will depend on the geopolitics. Let's admit the reality. I think when you look at the Accra Action Agenda and the agenda, the document that came out of it, it is a great document. There is already the private sector there. There are a number of things. What we need is to emphasize the A for action, I think, and we need to match an ambitious outcome, and we will be working with everyone around this table on that, with concrete initiatives that can create the trust that we need between everyone, certainly North and South. And I think what will be particularly crucial is to make sure that we focus on those win-win policies. Rural people, very, very, very important topic. Less than 1% of global climate finance goes to small farmer producers. We need to change that. If we align more our climate policies, our development policies, and tackle poverty and put children at the center, we'll be much better off. And I think this is the kind of win-win-win policies on the social, on the economic, and on the environmental front that we can push in Seville and beyond to build a more prosperous, more peaceful, more inclusive planet.
Anton, thank you very much. I mean, I think this couple of things come out very, very clearly. We need a new narrative about investment. I think that's very important. To come to your last point about Civi, I mean, and it sounds like we need what Commissioner Urpilainen underscored earlier, which is the political will and leadership to take the steps that we know are needed to enable national governments to invest more in these things that they know deep down, as the Prime Minister said, are priorities, and also to allow the international community to help them invest in those and to bring forward, let's say, to spur further investment. Please join me in thanking our panel for this very, very good discussion. Thank all of you and enjoy the rest of your Paris Peace Forum.
Ravi de faire connaissance.